projects, if there's something missing, we need to know that you think it's important, and maybe it shouldn't be missing. Right? But what we don't necessarily need to talk about anymore is how horrific living with floodwaters is, because we get it. So, as you stay with us in this process, and I hope you will, we really need you to help us choose the right, most beneficial, biggest bang for the buck project, and one that we can do, that we can fund, that's eligible for funding, and that we can do quickly and completely for your benefit. So that's really the purpose of this process tonight. And believe me, it doesn't hurt to hear stories again, because it always helps us, to go home and say, we've got to work harder. But the fact is, we've got $3 million to spend, and we only have a limited amount of time to spend it. And we have to come down on that one stone in the stream, all right? On that project that we need to do right now. So there are ins and outs, there are permit problems, there are DEC issues to overcome, there are lots of issues. But what is most helpful for us, and I thank you again for doing it, is to hear from you about which ones you think are most important. So let's leave how difficult it is, if you can, to live with floodwaters periodically behind us. And let's talk about what the future looks like in terms of what we can do about it right now with $3 million. Right?
Basically, you're asking us to sacrifice ourselves, pick something else up that might be more important. Like,
no, it's perfectly okay if you say my house is the most important thing.
I'm not
and in fact, I think that's fair to say.
I mean, like maybe we're selfish, but like the bridge in Phoenicia. I mean, Phoenicia attracts people, tourists, whatever. So maybe that bridge is a priority. But if you spend the money there, $2.7 million, and you got $300,000 left over, am I right?
Well, we've got to make sure that the projects that you all choose with us,
right,
are fundable, that there's no additional, that we discover any additional funding sources are, we manage our money coming in, going out, that it's eligible for funding under this program, that that we can do it engineering-wise, that it's feasible, that it's cost-effective, that it has a risk-benefit analysis that passes muster, all these things. The technical side of this program, we could talk about for days. But the reason we invite you to come periodically, and we hope you stay with us, is to hear what's most important to you, irrespective of the technicals. It doesn't matter to us. We're not asking anybody to sacrifice anything. We're not asking anybody to get on board with anything. What we're asking is for you to step up and say, I think this project is most important. Or, I don't see the most important project in my head on your board, and this is what I'm thinking. Simple as that. And we don't want to leave anybody behind in that informational pathway. Okay, we want to make sure coming out of the other end of this that we've heard from everybody who has anything to say about what's important to them. And again, I got to ring that bell again, to help us choose the best project that we can right now for the $3 million we have to spend. Whether that be on a single piece of property or on a major highway through this great valley like Route 28, whatever it is, we've got to choose it together, and we've got to get it done. Thanks. I appreciate it.
I've got a question to Eric. What's the value of gravel that might be harvested, that we're not harvested? What is its value?
Well, it costs to take it for a while.
Does it cost to take it? What is it worth if you have gravel to sell to some?
$4 a ton. It's not very expensive.
how much?
$4 a ton was the answer. And there's a lot of variables in what gravel's worth.
And how many tons do you imagine?
Couldn't even guesstimate.
Are we talking about tens of thousands?
We've had this discussion with DEC and in this committee and in other committees about establishing gravel harvesting deposition areas. And now that the DEC seems to be a little more open to it, we have to have the engineering to prove that these areas will be the optimal areas for gravel harvesting or gravel deposition areas. And then they have to meet a certain criteria to reharvest every time after the flood or whatever. So we are looking at what everybody here is talking about, because we all know we don't deal with it every day. So it's not something that we're not thinking about. Like the perfect example is the Route 28 bridge by 42 getting replaced. We DOT and saying, you got this massive gravel bar right above it. You know, what are you doing while you're replacing this bridge? So,
But it would be really useful to get some value from whatever it is, whatever gravel you could get out of the stream, to mitigate some of the
yes,
costs.
it probably would be, but the problem is a lot of that gravel's on private property, too.
No, I understand, no, I understand that there are legal issues on those. But I suspect that maybe a lot of the private property owners might be more than happy to allow harvesting to go on if it's going to protect their property and their houses.
The issue we've always run into that is, in order to harvest gravel from an area, you have to have an engineering study done, and that gets very expensive. So, I mean, that's where we're at now, is looking for funding from DEP, maybe in other areas for actually doing something like that. Or again, designating areas that would have the best effect on the stream overall.
Let me clarify. So is there a gravel harvesting project that you're looking at as part of stream restoration? What's the scope that you brought up earlier?
I assume prior to this, maybe it's changed over the last, what I'm looking at might be out a little bit, a few weeks outdated, but it was, the umbrella was the Stream Corridor Management Initiative. And there was different pieces of that had been brought up by the public and the committee. There was stream bank restoration, stabilization, invasive species control, et cetera, et cetera. And one of these, the major one in there, was potential actions include selective gravel harvesting and development of gravel deposit areas, like Eric's talking about, debris instead of impediment removal, et cetera. And one of the asterisks there was that the committee would work collectively or with public input to identify some of these sites that we know accumulate gravel. And I don't know, I assume it's, I think it's still on there. I don't see, but like you said, it's not eligible through this, but doesn't mean it shouldn't be on the list.
Let me, again, I'm sorry, Tom, but back to Bill's comments. The idea of this program is about what is fundable under the program. An initiative does not cost you money. An initiative is an idea. It does not cost you money to pay for an initiative. It may cost you for the science and modeling to look at those areas, to identify those areas. CDBG will not do that. We can do it here and look at those areas and identify them and say, yeah, you might want to look further at this and exemplify it further. But the program is going to fund it. I believe, and again, committee correct me, I believe it was not to a featured project, noting that we feel that it is a priority thing that we feel in the community should be addressed, but is not a fundable project through this guide, through the guidelines here. So therefore, we want to just keep the DEC on point that we really like this idea. We know it's not eligible for funds, but we are going to keep pressing you on this concept and this idea here to see if we can follow through to get this done. So again, it's back to shovels in the ground, feet on the ground, work getting done, projects that do something to help minimize our risk, make us better flood resilient communities, and keep us here longer term. Again, for all the years that I've been here, and we hear DEC wants us out, DEP wants us out, everybody wants us out of the area. Here you have the Department of State stepping in with all these agencies following and telling, going, what can we do to keep you here? And that's what this is all about. Again, it's not about this gravel. Again, gravel harvesting, and Eric and I can attest during Irene, the gravel that came out of Stony Cove went into Miller Road down there in Mount Tremper. We used it immediately. There was no cost. I mean, well, there's a cost, but there's also a benefit immediate to it. We know that in the past, they've harvested the gravel and used it in contractors' yards, for roads, for all these different things. There's really it's not a fundable thing through this program.
But
That's the whole question.
Rob, I think
We're trying to keep it on point
Yeah,
and
no,
say we want to focus on the gravel harvesting, but
We are. All
The
I
committee
want to-
really needs to hear about the projects that were listed tonight.
Listen, as one of the public members here, and you've heard tonight from, whether it's Nancy, or this gentleman, or these people, that one of the big issues is gravel in the stream banks.
Got it.
So, I know, and so you can go, and Bill can go up to Albany, and other people can go up to Albany, and argue for why funding for this kind of an effort to help save what's left in this town will actually come about, instead of having to wait another 50 years. I think everybody understands this program isn't designed necessarily to deal specifically with that problem. But you know, and I know you know, and I know Eric knows, and I'm sure Bill knows, that when it comes time to sitting down with the DEC up in Albany, that the last thing we want to hear is, we don't give out permits to work in the stream, and you can only work in the stream for 42 minutes out of the year, and all of this bullshit that goes with their regulations. So it's time to get serious, get real, because you've got homeowners here whose lives, whose properties are all at risk. And if we don't do something sooner than later, we're going to lose a good chunk of the rest of the town. God only knows our tax base hasn't been going up.
Absolutely correct, again, which is why it's still a
I got
future
one more
project.
question.
Well, we had a question.
Keeping them on.
Let's do this, and then I'll point
This
over
will be
here.
the last one, I promise.
Are the words gravel, or? Go ahead.
Two members of the committee said tonight that the gravel harvesting isn't fundable under this project. Why didn't either one of you tell me that the first time I brought it up months ago, the second time I brought it up months ago, and tonight to the end of the meeting? This is the first time I was told that it isn't fundable.
I can answer that.
I said,
Because we didn't necessarily know.
right, it's a learning curve.
Yeah.
for us, too.
You know,
That's the answer I.
All right, here's what we're gonna do, and then absolutely, there's more time to talk for everybody. So, we've captured all the notes on the harvesting, which is critically important, and it took a lot of us a long time behind the scenes to understand, the eligibility piece of it. Rob said this earlier, this shot off in mid-November, and everybody's been learning a lot in the last 6 or 8 weeks. I'm not making excuses, I'm just explaining the operating environment. And to a lot of us, it was like, just take the rocks out of the river and everything will be fine. And the scientists had to help us understand it's not that simple. It helps, but it's not that simple. So we're all getting there. It sounds like the town's committed to continuing this conversation. There's a featured project that will be sent up with all of these projects that will give it some teeth up in Albany, to your point, sir, but also the town will be looking for ways to continue this dialogue and keep moving it forward. What we do want to do, and I was going to follow on after Bill made his comments, we do want to hang out and have breakouts for anybody who wants to talk about specific projects at the different boards where they're hanging out. So let's hit a few more comments that are for the good of the order, for the overall group, absolutely. And then if you have specific questions, we'll have key people around the room to take those questions, if that's all right. Her hand's up first, and then yours.
I have one question as to what is eligible and what would be considered under this particular project. I saw that you were putting in a lot of generators, but that doesn't do much for the people that are in a dead-end valley and they can't get out and they're really trapped and hurting. There is a program that New York State offers available to municipalities, and she knows that. It's called PACE, and it's where municipalities can opt in, and anyone in those communities that has opted in can apply for solar panels on their house, so that in a time of disaster, they have electricity, they can turn on a radio, they can find out what's going on in the world, they can run their well, they can have some heat and things like that.
Sounds like a good, nice service program.
The
We'll
PACE
research that.
program, it's down in Peekskill, for one. You can talk to them as to how it works. But her husband has a doctorate in alternative energy, so I've been trying to push him to do something to help the town of Shandaken incorporate this. What happens is, you don't have to go out and buy the whole installation. You can fund it and it's put onto your property taxes, so that if you turn around and sell your house in 5 years, the balance of the funding rides with the property. So the new purchaser who would be benefiting from this solar energy would then assume the payments
Is this
on it.
nice, sir?
I think it is through NYSERDA. It's
We'll
called
get the
PACE,
details on this. This is
PACE.
good. Thank
With
you.
something like that,
Would be, and I think it's something that, again, since you brought it up, it's on record, we will look at it. I think right now we hurdle, so each time we come to the next segment, then, we can include whatever fits that criteria.
But we are finding as
we-
many possible potential funding opportunities for every
Absolutely.
project and
Absolutely.
crosswalking them for future
there's
application.
and we also need cell phone service in all the pockets.
It's all been discussed, we have cell service on our agenda also. Probably anything that you could come up with at this point, we have in a list of aspirational or featured projects. Right now, we're really gearing towards priority projects.
Because those things would benefit all.
Absolutely, yeah, one of the things I think, we have to all keep in mind is that, forget Bill, forget Tetra Tech and anybody else here who doesn't live in this town for a second. It's not a negative, it's a positive. They've been terrific to work with, but we live in this town, we care about this town, and the reason we are volunteering is because we want the right thing done for this town. We're on your side, we just met them 6 months ago, but we live here. I've been here almost 35 years, and we're not, the antagonists. We're here to get what this town really deserves. We want to stay here as long as possible, and I'm sure you do too. So, we're on your side, they're on your side too. So we're just trying to make it work. We're trying to go through the rules and put in as much as we can at any given point. So we're not trying to leave anybody out, but we need your comments. We don't know that we're leaving you out if you don't give us your comments, so.
Well, I was in a real bad car accident before you started meeting, and this is as soon as I can be up and around.
That's terrific, and you can email us, you can come in, every meeting is open to everybody. So we're gonna start tying this up, but there was one question in the back?
No, it was answered.
It was answered?
I have a comment.
Okay.
The DEC has been villainized as the one who does or doesn't issue the permits, but I wonder how much influence the DEP has on DEC, because in the last 15 or 20 years, as the DEP has emerged as a stronger player in the watershed, that's when the permits have dried up and the ability to work in the streams have dried up,
But it's also as the rechanneling, which was every year, stopped.
yeah, it's all,
15
since that time is when the permits become much more
And
restricted.
it took 10 years for everything to break down and the water to hit the road, but yeah.
Well,
I think Phoenicia flood before they finally let us dredge that.
Well, actually, the Phoenicia, the DEP actually paid for the engineering for that road.
But how long did it take? How many times did we flood on
They
Main
were gonna
Street?
pay for the actual work, and FEMA ended up paying for it because Hurricane Irene happened. And they actually started that engineering a year before Irene, because DEP saw that as a problem too, as the water going down Main Street is more of a problem than keeping the river stream. So DEP actually is starting to realize that keeping the stream in the channel is the better option. And if you go to Chichester to see the millions of dollars they spent in Chichester, and a lot more projects coming for them, so they're working with us. I don't think that DEC is the problem with the curriculum, without that.
You got a
Because
new
they were the ones
commissioner.
that required all this engineering to have that done information.
You got a new commissioner who's appointed this afternoon.
Well, we'll have to see how he is. Yeah.
Okay, I think we're gonna, unless there are any other serious questions, we're gonna table the meeting, and then we can break out into small sections. Joan thanks you, I thank you, everybody of the committee, come up and talk to us.
Are you impressed?